From the shadows, the Galactic Concordat had maintained peace among the 17 major spacefaring civilizations for over 800 years. Its central council chamber on Axiom Station housed representatives from each species, from the crystalline Vex to the gaseous Nimbari. They debated trade routes, mediated territorial disputes, and maintained the delicate balance of power that kept war at bay. Humanity was barely a footnote in these grand discussions. When Earth had been discovered 2 centuries ago, the humans were still struggling with primitive fusion drives and hadn't even colonized their own solar system. They were classified as a Level 3 civilization, technically spacefaring but lacking the technology for meaningful interstellar travel or communication. The Concordat had established the customary observation posts and cultural exchange programs. They introduced humans to the wider galactic community with carefully measured technology transfers that wouldn't disrupt Earth's natural development. Some corporations even established lucrative mining operations in Earth's asteroid belt, employing humans as cheap labor. Ambassador Thela Nor of Earth sat at the smallest desk in the council chamber, relegated to the outer ring where the minor species were seated. For 10 years, she had presented petitions for fairer treatment, for access to medical technology being withheld, for an end to the exploitative labor practices. For 10 years, she had been politely ignored. Today, that would change. In the center of the chamber, High Arbiter Zex Caluum of the Vex was addressing the Council on the latest adjustments to hyperspace tariffs when every communication device in the room chimed simultaneously. The message was brief, transmitted on all frequencies in every known language. Attention Galactic Concordat. The Independence vessel Nemesis has entered your space. Earth reclaims its sovereignty. Prepare to receive our ambassador with full diplomatic honors. Transmission ends. Confusion rippled through the chamber. The Arbiter's crystalline form refracted light in patterns of irritation as he called for order. Ambassador Noor, he said, his translated voice cold and precise. Please explain this unauthorized communication. Thela rose from her seat, her dark eyes steady. The message is self-explanatory. Arbiter, a vessel from Earth is approaching Axiom Station. I suggest you prepare to receive it. Earth possesses no vessels capable of reaching the station, the Arbiter replied. Your fastest ships would take decades tow. Perhaps you should check your sensors, Thela interrupted with a thin smile. The chamber fell silent as the main display activated. It showed a massive vessel emerging from what appeared to be a self-generated wormhole just 3 light minutes from the station. The ship was unlike any design in known space, sleek and predatory, with a matte black hull that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. It was enormous, easily the size of a Vex dreadnought, with odd geometric protrusions and weapon ports unlike any conventional armament. Impossible, whispered Grax Tun, the hegemony representative. Humans don't possess this technology. Not that you know of. Thela replied. We've been busy. The sensor readouts on the display were fluctuating wildly, unable to penetrate the vessel's hull or determine its power source. Then, as the Council watched in stunned silence, a smaller craft detached from the main vessel and accelerated toward the station. That would be my ride, Thela said, gathering her data tablets. I suggest we reconvene in 1 hour. Earth has terms to discuss. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, watching the Axiom Station grow larger on the view screen. The culmination of 30 years of secret development, Nemesis represented everything humanity had accomplished since they discovered the truth. The bridge crew, handpicked from every nation on Earth, worked their stations with the precision born of years of training. None of them had ever expected to see the stars like this, traveling faster than should be possible, in a ship that shouldn't exist. Status report, Chen said. All systems nominal. Admiral, his XO, Commander Layla Okafor, replied. The shuttle has docked with the station. Reaction from the Concordat forces is cautious but non-aggressive. They've deployed defense platforms but haven't powered weapons. They're confused, Chen said with grim satisfaction. Good. Maintain position and keep the wormhole generator on standby. If anything happens to Ambassador Noor, we extract immediately and proceed to Phase 2. Sir, a sensor officer called out, we're detecting movement from the Vex dreadnoughts in the outer system. 3 vessels moving to intercept positions. Chen nodded. As expected, let them come. Deploy defensive fields but take no aggressive action. On the massive view screen, the sleek silver forms of the Vex ships appeared, their crystalline structures catching the light of the system's star as they moved to surround the Nemesis. They're hailing us, communications reported. Let them wait, Chen replied. We speak when we're ready. The bridge fell silent, the tension almost palpable as the Vex ships drew closer. Chen allowed himself a small, tight smile. In all the scenarios they had run, this moment, this first confrontation, would set the tone for everything that followed. Admiral, said Commander Okafor, we're being scanned. Multiple frequencies, very invasive. Chen nodded. Time for our demonstration. Target the unoccupied moon of the 4th planet. Minimal yield, if you please. The weapons officer's fingers danced across his console. Target acquired. Graviton lance charged and ready. Fire. A pulse of energy, invisible to conventional sensors, lanced out from the Nemesis. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the small moon simply collapsed in on itself, its mass compressing to a fraction of its former size, before rebounding in a spectacular explosion that sent debris scattering across the system. The scanning beams from the Vex ships cut off immediately. Now, Chen said quietly, we'll take their call. The Concordat chamber had been hastily reconvened, but the calm decorum of the earlier session was gone. Representatives shouted over one another, demanding explanations, calling for military action, or urging caution. The Vex Arbiter had to activate the chamber's acoustic dampening fields 3 times before order was restored. Ambassador Noor now stood at the central podium, the position reserved for those addressing the full council. Beside her stood Captain Diana Reyes, commander of the shuttlecraft and official military attaché, her black uniform stark against the colorful garb of the alien representatives. The demonstration you witnessed was a fraction of the Nemesis's capability, Noor said into the silence. A graviton lance, technology we developed independently after discovering certain inconsistencies in the information you chose to share with us. This is an outrage, the hegemony representative growled, his furred mane bristling. You were classified according to established protocols. Technology transfers are regulated to prevent civilizational collapse. Is that what you tell yourselves? Noor's voice was cold. Earth has been systematically exploited for 2 centuries. Our resources stripped, our people used as cheap labor, medical technologies that could save millions withheld on the pretense of cultural development. We played along because we had no choice. That time is over. What do you want? The question came from diplomat Selmera of the Nimbari, her gaseous form shifting in patterns that indicated concern. Recognition, reparations, respect. Noor placed a data crystal on the podium. This contains Earth's terms. We want full membership in the Concordat, not observatory status. We want compensation for resources taken from our system. We want an end to the exploitative labor practices in our asteroid belt. And if we refuse, the Vex Arbiter's voice was dangerously calm. Captain Rice spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Then Earth withdraws from all contact with the Concordat. We close our borders, and if any vessel enters our space uninvited, we will consider it an act of war. You would threaten the combined might of 17 spacefaring civilizations. The Arbiter's crystalline form flashed with patterns of disbelief. We would defend ourselves, Rice corrected. The Nemesis is the first of our ships, not the last. We've spent 30 years preparing while you thought us primitive. Test us if you wish, but understand the consequences. The silence that followed was profound. The representatives looked at one another, their expressions ranging from outrage to calculation to fear. You have one standard day to consider our terms, Noor said, stepping away from the podium. The Nemesis will remain in position until then. As they left the chamber, Rise leaned close to the ambassador. Phase 1 complete, she whispered. Now we see who blinks first. In orbit around Axiom Station, the Nemesis waited, its black hull absorbing the light of the distant stars, a silent testament to humanity's determination to never again be at the mercy of those who saw them as less than equals. Confrontation. The emergency session of the Concordet's Inner Council was held in a secure chamber deep within Axiom Station, shielded from potential human surveillance. The 7 most powerful species representatives gathered around a holographic display of the Nemesis, studying the vessel that had upended centuries of established galactic order in a single day. Their demands are preposterous, High General Kryvax of the hegemony growled, his carnivore teeth bared in frustration. Full membership, reparations. They were lucky we even acknowledged their existence at all. Yet they somehow developed technology that eludes our best scientists. Countered Selmera of the Nimbari, her gaseous form shifting thoughtfully. The graviton lance alone represents a fundamental understanding of physics we have not achieved. The Vex Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with cold light. The question is not what they demand, but how they accomplish this. Our observation posts reported nothing. Their system was monitored continuously. Perhaps not as continuously as we believed, said diplomat Tuloran of the Cephians, his tentacles rippling with unease. Our intelligence suggests Earth has been aware of our surveillance for some time. They may have found ways to misdirect our attention. Regardless, the Arbiter continued, we cannot allow this precedent. If we capitulate to human demands, every minor species will seek to arm themselves and make similar threats. Selmera's form darkened. And if we refuse? You saw what their weapon did to Axiom Ivy's moon. What if the next target is this station, or one of our homeworlds? Silence fell as the council considered the unthinkable. We need time, Tuloran finally said. Time to assess their true capabilities, to formulate a response that preserves the Concordet's authority without provoking this Nemesis. Then we stall, the Arbiter decided. We inform Ambassador Noor that her demands require consultation with our homeworlds. Meanwhile, we mobilize our combined fleets and prepare contingencies for both diplomacy and conflict. The council members signaled agreement, none voicing the fear that hung in the chamber like a physical presence. What if humanity had already anticipated this very response? On the Nemesis, Admiral Chen reviewed the latest intelligence reports with his command staff. The ship's quantum arrays had intercepted and decoded most of the Concordet's supposedly secure communications. They're playing for time, Chen said, unsurprised. Exactly as we predicted. Commander Okafor nodded. The Hegemony and Vex are already mobilizing their reserve fleets. The Cephians are deploying stealth observers to Earth. The Nimbari seem genuinely interested in negotiation. And the others? Waiting to see which way the gravitational waves flow. Okafor replied with a thin smile. Minor species are already reaching out through back channels, sensing an opportunity in the disruption we've caused. Chen studied the strategic display, watching as red indicators representing Concordat military assets moved into position throughout the sector. They'll try to isolate us, cut Earth off while they build overwhelming force. That was always the most likely scenario, said Dr. Ileana Wright, head of Project Nemesis and the architect of much of the ship's revolutionary technology. The question is whether to let them try or to demonstrate further capabilities. Chen considered his options. The Nemesis had been built for this moment, the culmination of humanity's secret resistance against alien exploitation. What had begun 30 years ago with the discovery of a crashed alien scout ship had evolved into Earth's greatest gamble. We proceed as planned, he finally said. Let them think their movements are undetected. Ambassador Noor will continue negotiations while we prepare Phase 2. And if they attack prematurely? Okafor asked. Chen's expression hardened. Then they learn why you should never corner an animal you haven't fully studied. Ambassador Noor received the Concordat's official response with practiced diplomatic neutrality. The Vex Arbiter delivered it personally, his crystalline form carefully modulated to project reasonableness. The scope of Earth's demands requires consultation with our respective governments, he explained. We propose a 7-day recess to allow for proper consideration. 3 days, Noor countered immediately. The Nemesis will remain in position until then. Any military vessels approaching beyond the current cordon will be considered hostile. The Arbiter's form flickered with suppressed emotion. Ambassador, surely you understand the delicacy of this situation. Your unexpected arrival has created considerable concern. 7 days is already an accelerated timeframe for decisions of this magnitude. 3 days, Noor repeated, her voice firm. Earth has waited 2 centuries for justice. We will not wait longer. As the Arbiter departed, Captain Rice joined Noor in her temporary quarters on Axiom Station. They're already moving their fleets, Rice said without preamble. The Nemesis has detected at least 40 capital ships converging on this sector, with more mobilizing. Noor nodded, unsurprised. They can't afford to acquiesce. Their entire power structure is built on the subordination of lesser species. If they give us what we demand, their system collapses. Then war is inevitable, Rice said quietly. Perhaps. Noor's expression softened slightly. But remember our history, Captain. Sometimes the threat of violence accomplishes more than violence itself. The Nemesis isn't just a warship, it's a message. A message written in graviton fire, Rice noted with grim humor. Sometimes that's the only language power understands. 2 days later, the situation escalated. A hegemony battle group, claiming to be on routine patrol, approached the boundary established by the Nemesis. Admiral Chen watched their approach with calm detachment. They're testing our resolve, he observed to his bridge crew. Seeing if our warnings have substance. They've crossed the boundary line. Admiral, the tactical officer reported. Continuing on intercept course. Weapon systems are hot but not targeted. Chen nodded. Send 1 warning, standard protocols. If they continue approach, disable their lead vessel. The warning was transmitted and promptly ignored. The hegemony ships accelerated, their formation tightening into attack configuration. They believe we're bluffing, Commander Okafor said. A common mistake when dealing with an unknown adversary. Chen's voice remained calm. Weapons officer, target the lead vessel's propulsion systems. Minimal collateral damage, if you please. The Nemesis's graviton lance powered up, its energy signature causing the ship's lights to dim momentarily. The targeted beam struck the hegemony flagship with surgical precision. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. The ship simply stopped, its engines dead, momentum carrying it forward as it rotated helplessly in space. The remaining hegemony vessels scattered, their coordinated formation dissolving into chaos. Transmit to all Concordat frequencies, Chen ordered. The next vessel to cross our established boundary will be completely disabled. The one after that will be destroyed. We have shown restraint. Do not mistake it for weakness. As the message went out, Chen turned to his XO. Prepare for full deployment. I suspect we've just accelerated their timetable. The attack came 6 hours later, not from the hegemony or the Vex as expected, but from the Cephians, masters of stealth technology and ambush tactics. 3 strike cruisers decloaked within weapons range of the Nemesis, launching a barrage of quantum torpedoes before the human vessel could respond. Or so they thought. The torpedoes struck the Nemesis's hull and simply vanished, absorbed by defensive fields unlike any the Cephians had encountered. Before they could launch a second volley, the Nemesis responded with devastating efficiency. Graviton pulses struck 2 of the cruisers, crushing their central sections like paper. The third managed to raise shields in time, only to find them useless against the focused gravitational distortion. Within moments, all 3 attack vessels were reduced to drifting wreckage. Rescue their survivors, Chen ordered, his voice tight with controlled anger. Then initiate Phase 2. Throughout the bridge, officers moved with practiced precision, activating systems that had been prepared for this very contingency. The Nemesis's hull began to reconfigure, sections shifting and extending as hidden systems came online. Wormhole generators at full capacity, reported the engineering officer. Coordinates locked for all primary targets. Chen nodded grimly. Deploy the sentinels. From concealed bays along the Nemesis's hull, dozens of smaller craft emerged, each the size of a conventional frigate but unmanned, controlled by advanced AI systems. They arranged themselves in formation around the mothership, their black hulls identical to the Nemesis' own. All sentinels deployed and operational, Okafor confirmed, awaiting jump coordinates. Chen studied the strategic display once more. The Concordat forces were still gathering, unaware that their surprise attack had failed so completely. They would expect the Nemesis to retreat, to flee back to Earth for repairs and reinforcement. They were about to learn how thoroughly they had misjudged humanity's preparations. Transmit to all sentinels, Chen ordered. Phase 2 begins now. Deploy to target coordinates and await further instructions. The space around the Nemesis shimmered as multiple wormholes opened simultaneously. One by one, the Sentinel vessels disappeared into them, bound for locations throughout Concordat space. On Axiom Station, alarms began to blare as sensors detected unauthorized wormhole activity throughout the sector. The Galactic Concordat was about to discover that the Nemesis was not just a ship, it was the harbinger of a new era, where humanity would never again be subjugated. A new balance. Panic spread through the Concordat faster than any ship could travel. Reports flooded in from across controlled space. Black Sentinel vessels had appeared in orbit around 17 critical worlds, including each member species' homeworld. The Sentinels took no hostile action, but their presence, and their implied threat, could not be ignored. In the secure council chamber on Axiom Station, the atmosphere had shifted from outrage to something approaching fear. "This is beyond provocation," the Vex Arbiter stated, his crystalline form pulsing with barely controlled anger. "It is an act of war against all civilized species. Yet they have fired upon no civilian targets," Selmera of the Nimbari countered, her gaseous form churning with complex emotions. The only confirmed attack was in response to Cephian aggression. The Cephian representative remained silent, their species' humiliation still raw after the disastrous failed ambush. Ambassador Noor entered the chamber, her posture confident but not triumphant. She understood the delicacy of this moment. Humanity had seized the initiative, but escalation could still lead to devastation on all sides. "The Sentinels are positioned as a defensive measure," she announced without preamble. "They will take no action unless Earth or the Nemesis is attacked. They are a guarantee of our security, nothing more." "Nothing more." The hegemony representative's voice rose to a near roar. "You have placed weapons of mass destruction above our homeworlds. This is planetary hostage-taking." Noor's expression remained impassive. "We have placed observation posts in strategic locations, just as you have maintained around Earth for 2 centuries. The difference is merely one of technological capability." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber as her words sank in. Many of the representatives shifted uneasily, aware of the hypocrisy she had exposed. "What do you truly want, Ambassador?" The question came from an unexpected source. Representative Tiloran of the Cephians, his tentacles arranged in a pattern denoting serious inquiry. "Beyond the formal demands you presented, what does Earth seek in the greater scope of galactic affairs?" Noor considered her answer carefully. This was the moment for which all their planning had prepared her. "Equality," she said simply. "Not dominance, not revenge, but true equality. Earth has been treated as a resource to be exploited, our people as primitives to be managed. We demonstrated our capabilities not because we seek war, but because nothing less would force you to see us as equals." "And the Sentinels," pressed Tiloran, "will be recalled the moment we have guarantees of our sovereignty and security," Noor replied. We have no desire to maintain a permanent military presence throughout Concordat space, but neither will we return to vulnerability. The representatives exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between species that had dealt with each other for centuries. Something had shifted in the chamber. A recognition, perhaps, that humanity could not simply be bombed back into submission. "I propose," said Selmera, her form brightening, "that we acknowledge the changed circumstances and enter genuine negotiations with Earth, not under duress, but in recognition of a new reality." The Vex Arbiter's crystalline form remained rigidly controlled. "And what reality is that, Diplomat Selmera?" "That we are now 18 spacefaring civilizations, not 17, she replied simply. On the Nemesis, Admiral Chen watched the diplomatic proceedings through secure feeds. Beside him, Dr. Wright studied sensor data from the deployed Sentinels, confirming that Concordat forces had backed away from potential engagement points throughout the sector. "They're actually negotiating," Chen said, a note of surprise in his voice. "I expected more resistance." "The Concordat has survived for 8 centuries by adapting," Wright observed. "They recognize when the cost of conflict outweighs the benefits. Our demonstration with the Sentinels proved we could strike anywhere simultaneously, a capability none of them possess. And one we barely possess," Chen admitted quietly, so only Wright could hear. "The Sentinels drain power at an unsustainable rate. We have perhaps 48 hours before we need to recall them regardless of diplomatic outcomes." Wright nodded, unsurprised. "That's longer than we calculated. The modified wormhole generators are performing better than expected. Let's hope it's enough time for Noor to secure our position," Chen said. "Because if they call our bluff—" The thought remained unfinished as an alert sounded from the communication station. "Admiral," the officer called, "we're detecting unusual activity from the Hegemony fleet. They've broken formation and are accelerating toward 3 of our Sentinel positions simultaneously." Chen's expression hardened. "They're testing us again. Target the lead vessel in each group, standard disable protocol." The orders were transmitted to the Sentinels, which responded with precise graviton pulses that left 3 Hegemony cruisers drifting powerless in space. The remaining vessels immediately reversed course. "They needed to verify our control over the Sentinels," Wright said, "to confirm they weren't just elaborate decoys." Chen nodded grimly. "And now they know. Let's hope it discourages further tests. The Sentinels' weapon systems require even more power than their wormhole generators." "We planned for this, Marcus," Wright reminded him, using his first name for the first time since the mission began. 30 years of preparation. The hardest part was getting here. Now we just need to hold position long enough for diplomacy to catch up with reality." "Diplomacy," Chen said with a slight smile. "The continuation of war by other means, or was it the other way around?" The negotiations stretched through 30 exhausting hours. Ambassador Noor, supported by Captain Rice and a small team of Earth's finest diplomatic minds, fought for each concession with stubborn determination. The Concordat representatives, recovering from their initial shock, employed every tactic in their considerable diplomatic arsenal to minimize the changes to the established order. Yet the silent presence of the Sentinels in orbit around their homeworlds ensured that outright rejection was never an option. In the end, compromise was reached. Earth would receive full membership in the Concordat, with all the rights and privileges that entailed. A commission would be established to calculate fair compensation for resources extracted from the Sol system. Most importantly, Earth would maintain independent control of its defense forces, including the Nemesis and any sister ships, while agreeing to limitations on their deployment in Concordat space during peacetime. As the final terms were formalized, Noor transmitted the success code to the Nemesis. Throughout Concordat space, the Sentinel vessels simultaneously activated their wormhole generators and disappeared, returning to the safety of the mothership. Some of the representatives visibly relaxed as reports confirmed the Sentinels' withdrawal. The Vex Arbiter, however, remained rigidly composed. "You have achieved your aims through threat of force, Ambassador," he said as the session concluded. "Remember that such tactics create enemies as easily as they create allies." Noor met his gaze steadily. "We achieved our aims through the only means you left available to us, Arbiter. Had the Concordat treated Earth fairly from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary." The Arbiter's crystalline form flashed in patterns too quick to interpret. Perhaps this reveals humanity's true nature more clearly than centuries of observation ever could. "Judge us by our actions going forward," Noor replied, "just as we will judge the Concordat by how it honors this agreement." One standard month later, the Nemesis returned to Earth orbit. Its mission complete, the revolutionary vessel had become both a symbol of humanity's new status and a guarantee that the hard-won agreements would be respected. In a private observation lounge, Admiral Chen stood with Dr. Wright and Ambassador Noor, watching the blue-green world beneath them. After years of secret preparation and weeks of intense confrontation, this moment of reflection seemed almost unreal. "They still don't understand how we did it," Noor said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The Concordat's intelligence services are tearing themselves apart trying to figure out how Earth developed this technology without detection." "Let them wonder," Wright replied with a tired smile. "The simple truth that we reverse-engineered it from their own crashed scout ship would be too humiliating for them to accept anyway." Chen's gaze remained fixed on Earth. "What matters is that it worked. For the first time since first contact, humanity controls its own destiny." "At what cost, though?" Noor asked quietly. "We've secured our place, but we've also shown the galaxy a side of humanity they never expected to see." The Arbiter wasn't wrong. "We've made enemies today, as well as allies. Every spacefaring species has had to prove itself," Chen countered. "We simply did it more efficiently than most." "And more peacefully," Wright added. "Despite everything, we didn't destroy a single inhabited world or kill unnecessarily. The hegemony would have glassed Earth without a second thought if our positions were reversed." Noor nodded, acknowledging the point. "So what happens now?" Chen turned from the viewport, his expression resolute. "Now we build. The Nemesis was just the beginning. Earth will need a true fleet, diplomats for 100 worlds, colonists for new systems. We stepped onto the galactic stage. Now we have to prove we deserve to stay there." Beyond the observation lounge, engineers and scientists were already at work, applying what they had learned from the Nemesis to new designs. Earth's industries, freed from Concordat restrictions, were tooling up for an age of expansion. Universities were developing curricula for a generation that would grow up knowing the stars were within reach. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's bold gambit. Whether that change would lead to a more just and equal Concordat or to new conflicts remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: Earth would never again be dismissed as a backwater world of little consequence. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. Now they would have to learn how to keep it.